Charlie Kirk's name was already known across the country, but it was the hidden figure behind the encrypted messages, someone investigators only call the Watcher, who turned his death into a nightmare that gripped an entire nation. The quiet suburb of Willow Heights had never faced anything like the night Charlie Kirk was killed. A place known for manicured lawns and low crime suddenly became the center of a nationwide investigation. Charlie, a well-known political commentator, was found lifeless in his home office, the glow of his laptop still casting cold light across the room. There was no sign of forced entry, no shattered windows or broken locks. The alarm system remained armed as if nothing had happened. To neighbors, the silence was almost as shocking as the crime itself. Everyone knew, everyone, or at least believed they did, and the thought of a killer moving unnoticed through their streets unsettled even the most composed residents. Detectives quickly focused on the one piece of evidence that seemed out of place: a series of encrypted messages on Charlie's computer. The first message was unlike anything investigators had seen. It contained a simple countdown of 5 numbers, each separated by hours instead of seconds, as if marking an invisible clock. There was no greeting, no explanation, only a steady march from 5 down to 1. The font was plain, the background stark white, yet the message radiated menace. Forensic experts worked overnight trying to track the origin, but every digital trail led to dead ends. Whoever sent it knew exactly how to vanish behind layers of encryption. The unsettling thought settled in that this wasn't a random attack or a deranged stranger. It was calculated, planned with precision, and executed by someone with extraordinary technical skill. The discovery of the countdown changed the direction of the investigation. Immediately, detectives reviewed security cameras from the neighborhood, expecting to see a shadow or a passing car. But there was nothing. Even traffic cameras miles away provided no clues. The numbers themselves became an obsession. Did they represent dates, distances, times? Each theory led to more questions, and the clock in that first message seemed to echo in every officer's mind. As the hours passed, a collective sense of being watched began to spread through the investigative team. They began to wonder if the sender had anticipated every move, if each number had already predicted an outcome they hadn't yet realized. By dawn, what had started as a straightforward homicide had transformed into a chilling psychological game. Willow Heights was no longer the safe, predictable town it had been the night before. It was a stage for a hidden opponent who had already made the first move, and perhaps many more. Hours after the coroner began the autopsy, a second message arrived and deepened the mystery. This time it wasn't numbers but a single photograph attached to an empty email. The image showed Charlie Kirk's house, framed from a perfect vantage point that only someone familiar with the neighborhood could have chosen. Porch lights glowed faintly, and a faint reflection of the moon lit the driveway. The timestamp revealed it had been taken minutes before Charlie's death, a silent witness to the crime. Investigators immediately canvassed the area, questioning every neighbor about unusual activity, but no one reported seeing a stranger. The gated community's security cameras, which normally captured every vehicle and visitor, had gaps in their footage, hours of unexplained blackouts on the very night of the murder. It was as if someone had slipped through the system like a shadow. Digital forensics experts pored over the photos' data, hoping for a GPS tag or a hint of the camera model. Yet the metadata had been scrubbed with remarkable precision. No lens information, no geolocation, not even the usual digital noise that lingers in an edited file. Whoever sent it understood how to erase a digital footprint. The angle of the shot suggested it was taken from an upstairs window across the street, perhaps a neighbor's bedroom or attic. Detectives knocked on doors and asked to see camera rolls and devices. Every resident complied, yet nothing matched. Either the photographer lived in the neighborhood and hid the evidence, or they had gained temporary access to a home without anyone noticing. This revelation shifted suspicion inward. Investigators began to consider the possibility of an insider, maybe someone who attended the same local gatherings or waved hello on morning walks. The thought that the killer could be a friendly face unsettled the community. Parents kept children indoors, and nightly patrols doubled. But fear turned to dread when analysts noticed a subtle distortion in the photo's lower corner, a faint streak of light that almost formed a shape. Some believed it was the blurred outline of a person. Others thought it was merely a trick of the camera. Yet the idea that the killer might have been standing within a few feet of Charlie's home at the very moment the picture was taken and only minutes before the fatal attack brought an unnerving realization. The murderer wasn't just watching. They were close enough to touch the door, close enough to hear the sounds inside, close enough to know exactly when to strike. The third message arrived with no warning, just a blank subject line and an attachment filled with strange symbols. At first glance, it looked like a child's doodle's crooked circles, jagged lines, and uneven arrows scattered across a dark background. Detectives assumed it was meant to confuse them, but a codebreaker noticed something odd about the pattern. When the shapes were overlaid on a digital map of Willow Heights, they aligned almost perfectly with the streets near Charlie Kirk's childhood home. The uneven arrows matched intersections, and the circles marked key landmarks. Hidden within the pattern was a sequence of numbers that matched a date decades earlier, the anniversary of a fire that had destroyed a nearby house and claimed the lives of 2 residents. That old fire had faded into local legend, mentioned only in passing at community gatherings. Yet digging through dusty records uncovered a chilling connection. Charlie's family had once lived just 3 houses away from the site of the blaze. Though he had been a young boy at the time, his parents had testified in the investigation. The case remained unsolved, and one survivor, a teenager who lost both parents, had disappeared soon after. Detectives wondered if this forgotten tragedy was the key to understanding the present crime. Perhaps the killer carried a grudge that stretched back to childhood, something far more personal than politics or notoriety. The more investigators studied the symbols, the clearer the message became. A spiral drawn near the map's center pointed to a specific intersection, a place that matched the location of the old fire's remains. Forensic teams searched the site and uncovered charred fragments of what once might have been a locket or pendant buried deep in the soil, a relic untouched for years. Though the object revealed no fingerprints or identifying marks, the discovery confirmed that the killer was deliberately drawing them into the past. Psychological profilers warned that the murderer might be reliving an old trauma, using these cryptic messages as both a confession and a taunt. The eerie precision of the symbols suggested someone who had studied the neighborhood for years, possibly even returning secretly to observe it. Residents who had lived there for decades were interviewed again, but no one recalled seeing any stranger revisiting the fire site. The sense of a hidden connection grew stronger, as though the killer was weaving the forgotten pain of long ago flames into the present, pulling the investigation toward a motive buried beneath decades of ashes and resentment. The fourth message arrived just as investigators felt they were starting to piece the puzzle together. Unlike the earlier cryptic symbols or shadowy photos, this email was blunt and precise, containing only a set of coordinates and a brief note: follow the river, find the time you lost. The wording unsettled the team, but the coordinates were unmistakable. They pointed to a desolate stretch of riverbank nearly 20 miles from Willow Heights, a place where few people ventured except fishermen and occasional hikers. Detectives prepared a quiet search, bringing forensic divers and evidence technicians before dawn to avoid alerting the public. The area was silent except for the soft rush of water and the hum of insects. Hours of searching turned up nothing until a junior officer noticed a small stack of smooth stones arranged in a deliberate pattern near the river's edge. Beneath the stones lay Charlie Kirk's missing wristwatch, the one item unaccounted for when his body was discovered. It was still ticking, the second hand sweeping steadily despite exposure to moisture. The discovery sent a chill through the team. Not only had the killer known the watch was missing, but they had also predicted exactly where and when investigators would find it. The precision suggested the murderer had either been present during the crime or had inside knowledge of the investigation. As every step, forensic testing of the watch offered no answers. No fingerprints clung to the metal. No DNA lingered on the strap. Even the surrounding soil bore no trace of fresh disturbance, as though the item had been placed there long before the search began. Investigators replayed the coordinates repeatedly, trying to understand the phrase "find the time you lost." Some believed it referenced the missing hours of security footage from the night of the murder. Others thought it was a personal jab at Charlie himself, a reminder of moments from his past that could never be recovered. The message deepened the psychological game. It was no longer just about finding clues. It felt like following a script written by someone who delighted in controlling the narrative. The river site was remote, yet whoever left the watch had evaded cameras and motion sensors, moving with a confidence that bordered on supernatural. Detectives began to suspect they were being guided, each discovery choreographed to keep them chasing shadows. With every step, the unseen killer seemed to whisper that they were always one move ahead, watching the investigation unfold exactly as planned. The final message arrived in the dead of night, just as investigators prepared to release their first public statement. It was a simple text delivered simultaneously to every member of the core investigative team. There was no subject line, no signature, only 5 words glowing on their screens. I am already someone else. Unlike the previous messages, this one offered no coordinates, no photo, no code to decipher. It was a declaration, cold and absolute, as if the killer wanted to leave a final scar rather than a trail. Attempts to trace the message failed instantly. Digital forensics experts found no originating IP address, no cell tower ping, not even a hint of routing data. It was as if the words had materialized out of thin air. The impact on the team was immediate. Investigators who had spent weeks combing through clues suddenly felt they were chasing a ghost. If the murderer had already become someone else, then the entire search for a face, a name, a past identity might be meaningless. Psychological profilers suggested the phrase could signal a complete transformation, new appearance, new documents, perhaps even a life lived under a different nationality. Others interpreted it more darkly, as a metaphor that the killer had always worn masks, blending into ordinary society long before the crime. National media seized on the story, speculating about everything from political vendettas to secret double lives. Tips poured in from across the country, each claiming to recognize someone who might fit the elusive profile. Yet every promising lead collapsed under scrutiny. Surveillance footage from airports, train stations, and highways revealed nothing. The killer seemed to move beyond reach, slipping through the vast net of law enforcement as if anticipating every step ahead of time. In Willow Heights, the atmosphere grew tense and watchful. Neighbors who once trusted each other now locked doors before sunset, studying familiar faces for hidden intent. Families whispered that the murderer could be a friendly store clerk, a passing jogger, or even a longtime acquaintance who had simply changed enough to be unrecognizable. Detectives continued to examine the earlier messages for overlooked details, but the trail felt cold. Months passed, and the case remained unsolved. The countdown, the photograph, the map of old tragedy, the riverbank discovery, each piece formed a story without a final chapter. The last 5 words lingered like a curse over the investigation, a reminder that the killer's greatest weapon was not violence alone, but the ability to vanish into the ordinary, to walk among everyone as someone entirely new, while the world searched for a person who no longer existed.